So I am going to call this meeting to order. Thank you very much to all of you for getting here at about the right time. Appreciate it, and really appreciate you, Eric, Janine, and Steve joining us as well for this discussion. Sherry has sent a note. She is not going to join us, but we do have a quorum of the Board Governance Committee. So I'll take a motion to adopt the meeting agenda.
I move to adopt the meeting agenda.
I second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay. We've got the minutes attached from the January 9th meeting, so we'll want to approve those. Any discussion on the minutes from the last meeting? If none, I'll accept the motion to approve the minutes from the January 9th meeting.
Okay. I'll
It's
move for
January 13, that's my fault on the minutes, that needs to change. Yeah, I
January
apologize.
13?
Yeah.
Okay. So we got a motion, do we have a second?
I second. I'm trying to get to Dropbox.
No worries. Ray, Eve. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
that. Aye.
Okay. Next is member comments. Item B.
No, I need better health care.
Uh-oh.
No, I'm a week and a half into a cold that's not going away. Thank you for asking. Give me something else to cough up.
So we have member comments.
Yes. I think she went out, did she go out to get the sign-up?
Kate,
I think she went to get Eric
She
some
went
water.
out to drink.
Right.
Why don't you go first?
Let's see if there's a sign-up. I saw
That's
one
right.
over by
That's
here.
right. It's gonna get better, right?
Okay, I'll make a comment. Okay, so I read the report.
okay, so we'll
Just
start
Arlene.
with Arlene.
Yeah. Okay, so I read the Stone Turn report on Tetra several times, and I think it's a very, very serious thing, and I see it as a tremendous failure of this government, and it is my hope that we take this very, very seriously, and it's my hope that those responsible are, I don't know what the word that I would use, are held responsible, and that action is taken. I hope that you adopt all of the Tetra recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Arlene. Erwin?
I have,
We're recording it, Erwin, so if there's the camera, say hi, shout your name. I think folks,
Speak loudly, just to make sure that.
my name is Erwin Flashman, I live at 1327 Buttermilk Lane. And, these are my comments. With respect to the Stone Turn report, it's a serious report as far as it goes. There was a report issued today by Reston 2020, which I recommend that you take a look at if you have not already seen it. It raises a lot of questions. It doesn't necessarily have all the answers. It essentially recommends that the new board form a committee and take its time to investigate more deeply the questions that it raises, among others, that may be found along the way. So if you have a profound understanding of exactly what occurred, there are lots of gaps. Stone Turn focuses on the process mostly without diving deep. And the rest of 2020 suggests diving deep. And I think that that would be appropriate. And I'd like to also comment on the material that was included under the conflict of interest review.
excellent, good.
There were two conflict of interest regulations, rules from two other organizations that were included in the materials. Neither one fully adapts itself to the needs of the rest of the association. They have a different set of circumstances. They're different basic entities. And so we really need to take a very careful look. We cannot adopt one or the other and say, this is ours. And I think it needs careful integration with what exists today. And I comment to you that the form for this conflict of interest statements that currently is used does not conform either to the law or to the resolution that is in force. And so you need to make sure that they conform to the form conforms to the resolution and the resolution to the law. I think there's room for improvement, nevertheless, but I would recommend that you come up with a draft and circulate it so that we have time to comment before you decide to go forward with it. And I would be happy to give you comments once you come in, but it needs to be done very carefully.
Appreciate those comments, both on the Stone Turn report, the Tetra review, as well as the conflict of interest. Welcome your comments on the conflict of interest, even in advance. I know that Bruce, when he had shared that information, said, look, this is not necessarily what you need, but these are examples that you might follow. And clearly, we're a unique organization, so the conflict of interest statement should conform to that. On the Reston 2020, I have not received anything from Reston 2020. I'm assuming you've seen the report.
It went out.
You have to log
It went out.
on.
Did it?
I thought it was sent to the members of the board.
It was.
You
When
might
was it
want to
sent?
check on your
This-
BOT.
Late morning.
Late morning?
account.
Okay. I haven't looked at my email today, so,
It's what,
okay.
10, 11 o'clock, I think.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Erwin. Tammy? Thank you for coming out.
Tammy Betreen, 2503 Foxcroft Way. I am concerned about the meeting tomorrow night that was scheduled several weeks ago at least, that we don't know, the public does not know the form of that meeting, the format, how members can comment, for how long, what the time frame is. I saw a draft thing in your packet that came out. I think that was Friday, which indicates that member comments would be last. Again, this doesn't seem to be real transparent when we're not, a meeting is scheduled a couple weeks, and then you all are deciding less than 24 hours before the meeting what the format's going to be. So I don't know how members can prepare, react to that. I would just like to say, and also echoing the previous comment that whatever comes out of the Tetra review, the new board has to decide that. The March meeting is too soon to get everything wrapped up. So, thank you.
Just a couple of things, Tammy. In terms of process, that's precisely why, the agenda for the special meeting, we wanted to make sure that this committee had an opportunity to weigh in, to discuss and debate what would be the best format of that meeting.
Can we then delay the meeting so that members are prepared? Why was it, you had, I totally empathize with that. I think
Yeah.
you should weigh in.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely appropriate. I think it's inappropriate to have the meeting 24 hours after the members hear what the format's going to
Yeah.
be.
It's likely that that meeting is going to be delayed due to snow in any case, so.
Well, we didn't know there was snow.
No, I know that, but,
75
I mean, really,
degrees.
this is just
But-
calendar conflicts. We didn't want the meeting to be 100 years from now. This board needed to be able to, work on the structure of it, and so we would.
Yeah, no, this committee.
That's what I meant, this committee,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I totally empathize with that. I
Yeah,
totally,
no, it's-
I just don't know why this is the 13th and the 14th is
Because that was,
the meeting. That's not right.
Yeah, that's why when Kate sent it out, I wanted to make sure that the agenda for this meeting and the 14th were included.
Right.
so folks could see it. And again.
Right, and again, if comment members are commenting and the meeting goes really long and there are, I don't know if 2 members will show up or 40.
Yeah.
And that's, and then the way that was structured, if I read it correctly, and I don't have it with me, the board was going to discuss it before members commented. You need to hear what's going to be said at that, I think.
Yeah.
If I were making a decision, I would want that. So,
Thank you, Ken.
thank you.
Thank you for coming out. All right. Any comments before we get started from our group here? Ray?
I'm ready to get rolling on the agenda.
Eve?
No, good, thanks.
Why don't we start with you, Steve? Steve, anything? Eric? Janine? No? Okay, so item E, we're just moving right along. We're 30 minutes ahead of schedule. That's a good thing. Thank you for that.
And it's the,
All right.
Pause to bask in that for just a moment.
Yeah, let's just
Yeah.
enjoy the moment.
Yep,
all right?
yep.
So next item here is Stone Turn Report, review and discussion, and the draft special board meeting agenda. Let me make some general comments myself. I must say I really appreciated the opportunity to work with Eric on this. As you know, Eric and I both were approved unanimously by the board to be the points of contact with Stone Turn. I must admit, Stone Turn was truly a very professional organization. Dee and her team were just very remarkable to work with.
Yep.
I did review the report very carefully. As you all know, I've been involved. I was on the board when the Tetra property was discussed, and I've sat through. I thought that Tetra did a very good job pulling together the timeline. I know that they had the benefit of working with many members in the community to gather all that information. I believe it was very thorough. I thought the recommendations were very practical. I would like to see all of those recommendations adopted in short order, and would like to hear from Kate and others in terms of what a reasonable timeline is. I don't want expediency and time to drive the implementation of the recommendations. I want to make sure that the recommendations are fully adopted so that in the future we're able to manage projects and programs of comparable complexity, perhaps even more complexity, in an effective way. Stone Turn raised this in the report. They said that the Tetra purchase and renovation was relatively unique. Well, clearly the purchase was very unique. The renovation is clearly something that we're going to see more of. We've been fortunate in this community to have all these assets gifted to us. The oldest assets are 50 years. Others are certainly approaching that. When I first joined the board, the Dogwood Pool was being renovated. That was a $1 million+ project. We have the CSF facility in front of us, and there are other projects that we're considering. And the recommendations that Stone Turn made as a result of their thorough review of the Tetra situation just demonstrates that there are real weaknesses in the systems that we have, and we need to move forward. The other question I asked, and I've been asking this very broadly, I know I asked Eric as we were going forward, what are the gaps? If you take a look at what Stone Turn had presented in the report, are there other things that the community is saying that says, yeah, that's okay for what Stone Turn looked at, and granted the scope was really limited for a whole host of reasons, but are there other related things that we ought to consider? And so I would be interested in knowing your thoughts on things that weren't included, but we ought to be considering as we're debating this. At some point, we're going to have to move forward. We need to use this as a learning experience, and we need to remedy the situation, and we need to move forward. And I want to be very much involved in helping not only the board move forward, but also the community. And it's the board working with the community moving forward. That being said, would be interested in the meeting that will likely be postponed tomorrow because of weather, but I would really like to hear from the community, what are the gaps? How do we move forward? What do we do in order to remedy the weaknesses and move forward with confidence as a board, as an organization, and as a community? So, again, I really thank the three of you for joining the governance committee. And I very much thank Ray and Eve and Sherry for their shepherding this issue within RA. So let me turn it over first to Eve and then to Ray, and then we can hear from you all.
I thought that the report was, there were some things from an accounting perspective that were surprising to me. I'm not an accounting-oriented person generally, but just some sort of things that just in my business life, just sort of a presumption that some things were in place that were not in place. Clearly, need to move forward on those things, encumbrances and things like that. It seems that, there's some shortfalls, and I think that our lack of experience with projects of this size and scope is very likely the thing that led to most of that. I went through the 2020 review in a fairly quick pace today. I didn't have time to dig into it too deeply. I am concerned about a couple of things in terms of the agenda and which board is responsible for what. I think that any sort of basic things that this board can implement, it should implement. I don't think there's any reason not to. We are the board that essentially, with a couple of exceptions, voted this in. And I think that there's some, responsibility and accountability for trying to make course corrections where possible. I am worried, though, about the notion of, I don't have any problem with digging into, okay, if this timeline looks wonky, then, let's dig in and understand why that timeline looks wonky. We are never going to make some members of the community happy about some answers, okay? We contracted and paid $2.65 million. That's what we paid. There was an appraisal that supported it. I get that people don't like that appraisal. Those things are not going to change. And so we can just spend forever sort of churning about it. And I don't know that isn't going to help things going forward. So unless there was some, smoking gun that said, oh, well, somebody got paid under the table to, which clearly there was not, then I think that there are going to be some things that, people are just never going to be happy about. But we do still have to move forward. And sort of engaging in a process that essentially has us sort of, chewing our own foot out of a trap, I don't think is going to be productive. So I hope that we are able to focus things productively and so that we can move forward. I mean,
Just looking at that rat trying to chew his
yeah,
foot out of
well, I
the
mean,
trap.
I was thinking of a wolf myself,
Okay.
rather than a rat, but, okay.
Whatever.
Whatever, yeah. Yeah, so I just would like, so in terms of format, goodness gracious, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that,
This is the format for the meeting, on the public meeting,
right,
yes.
yeah, I think it's a hard question. I mean, because I don't know that hearing a few more hours of the things that we've already heard and that there's not different answers to is going to be helpful. That's all.
Ray?
Thank you. I spent an enormous amount of time going over the Stone Turn report. I met with several members, I met with Sherry, and have gone over this thing in excruciating detail. And every time I read it, I get a little bit sicker than the time before that I read it. And Tammy and Terry and the rest of 2020 people, there's a lot of talk these days about wiretapping. You must have been wiretapping my house over the weekend because about 95% of what we came up with was in today. And today is not the day to go over it all, but I would like to put this Reston 2020 report into the record and say that I find nothing objectionable in it. It looks entirely factual. The questions they're asking, very valid, and the members deserve and want answers, accurate, honest answers to all of them. Now, maybe we could take some of the basic recommendations from the end of the report, get them going right away, and do it through this particular board. But from every email I've gotten, from Sherry's email, from Arlene's comments, Tammy's comments, the bulk of this needs to be reviewed by the next board. And it's a major election issue right now. It will become more so as people absorb this report, try to understand what happened, what should happen. It should be released, the opinions should be released in detail so that the voters can decide for themselves whether they think these things have already been heard and dealt with or not, or whether they think it's not productive to go into all of this or not. Let's let them decide that. I personally think there's so much in here that's unanswered. It needs to be answered. And it's not a simple matter of, oh, we did a few things wrong, let's change the process. I sense that if this process was in place 2 years ago, this still would have happened. And there's a lot of stuff in here, quite frankly, in the Stone Turn report that is so basic, I can't believe that we didn't do it, whether we had a policy in place or not. And I'll discuss that more when we get to the full board meeting. This is not the time for it. I do want to make a couple of points, though, before I pass this on. It has been noted by Stone Turn, and noted again by the authors of this report from Reston 2020. And I'll read the Stone Turn comment on it, word for word. Now, the Board Operating Committee met in the first week of March 2016. They discussed these overruns, and Kate was there. And it was very well known that we had a huge problem in the first week of March of 2016. I didn't know about it, Sherry didn't know about it, Lucinda didn't know about it until a couple of days before the late May board meeting, where we get the package as usual a couple of days before the meeting. And we were handed several options, all of which were how to fund this enormous overrun, which just hit me like a ton of bricks in late May. Not whether you approve the overrun, not whether you think we should pay the money, or if there's another alternative to this. This money's already been blown. How do you want to account for it? Anyone who wants to go back to that May board meeting and watch it on YouTube, I strongly recommend it. Myself and Lucinda were vociferously opposed to this, and we voted no on the funding. It was a 6-2 vote. My sense is all 6 of the other members had plenty of knowledge well before that there was an overrun. And for something of this nature, in early March, to be known by the Operation Committee and the CEO and discussed, and never for the 3 other board members to even get an inkling that this was happening. It took a lot of effort to keep that information from us. Here's the Stone Turn report. The Board Operation Committee was made aware of the internal renovations overrun at their March 16 meeting, but the full Board of Directors was not notified until the May 2016 meeting. Though the BOC is tasked with deciding which items are presented to the full Board of Directors, which I assume will be their excuse for not telling me, it is not clear to us why this was not immediately communicated. Well, it's somewhat clear. At the time, I thought the reason might be, and I'm thinking more and more that it was, I can't think of any other reason, that beginning in early March of last year, there was the election coming out. And there was one heated election, which a lot of people were supporting the candidate that didn't win, and it was pretty close, versus an incumbent who was present in everything related to Tetra. It is very suspicious, and I don't like just connecting the dots and saying that that's factual, but you have to come to some conclusions, and the dots are awfully close to each other for me to conclude that not wanting an overrun known to the membership or to anybody else was a major priority, because if that had been known, we all know that more than likely would have been much more beneficial to John Bowman's campaign than his opponent's campaign. But for whatever the reason, this went more than 10 weeks before 3 board members even found out about it. And none of the public knew about it. You have to really work hard in this day and age, especially on something of this magnitude, to keep that kind of a secret. That bothers me. It's mentioned in Stone Turn, it's mentioned by Terry and Tammy and the rest of them 2020 people, and that needs to be on the table. I want to know why, and I don't want any BS on this. Somebody's lying, and I want to know who it is. My second thing, it's on page 7 and 8 of the Reston 2020 report, is also significantly mentioned in Stone Turn. The role of the working group in escalating costs of this project is absolutely absurd. That members who were appointed to a working group have the power to direct contractors. And by the way, we're saying we can't even find the contract, and we can't even match the bills to a contract because there is no contract. Well, that is so illogical just defies belief. But we had a board liaison, who was a former president in charge of the working group, who said time and time again, over and over again, that this was a model working group for the community. They're doing an absolutely fantastic job, and future working groups should all follow their lead and do exactly as they're doing. And that's all the feedback we ever got from him, all the way through April, while this huge overrun is happening. Now, I don't know how the working group can direct the contractor. They knew what the budget was, by the way, and they should ask for approval anyway. We all know that. I don't care whether they're volunteers or not volunteers. They knew it, we know it. It didn't happen. They were not stopped by the board liaison. They evidently weren't directed by him, unless his direction was go ahead and do it. And there's all sorts of things in both reports discussing how there were a lot of approved expenditures before the board even got it. The board was basically rubber stamping and covering the paperwork behind a decision which was already made. This is throughout both reports. Yeah, that's a problem, and yeah, it's something we have to have on this new chart. But it's also a problem with, I don't care what chart or no chart, how the heck could that possibly happen? And to Arlene's point, somebody or some people need to be held accountable. We need to know what happened and why, and somebody has to be held accountable for this. These things are absolutely outrageous that they happen. And there were actually 2 board liaisons involved with that Lake House working group, because Ken left in April and we didn't learn until late May. And third is just a general thing. If you go back to the May meeting of last year, when Lucinda and I were very upset, Sherry wasn't at that meeting, she would have been quite upset also, I'm sure, that I mentioned the analogy of how the RA board runs. And I mentioned that it was like the old Soviet Union, where we had a Communist Party leader, called all the shots, made all the decisions. Then you had a 9-person Politburo underneath that, just basically nodded their head and said, yes, sir. And then you had the Supreme Soviets under that. Go ahead and get this done. The analogy between our CEO on top of 9 board members, the Politburo, on top of the staff, the Soviets, is so striking to me. And I watched it again on Saturday. That's exactly the way it was. You read this report, and you read both reports, that is how it was. The commander, the commissar, whatever you want to call the leader, had already made decision. This thing was studied way before January of 2015. The whole idea that we were going to buy this way before then. The details and how it was all put together before then. Notices and letters of intent to the contractors before the board ever approved them, throughout. And then, at the end of the day, 9 hours of executive sessions in a 10-month period early in 2015. 9 hours. And at the end of the day, every single vote that came out of every single executive session came out 9-0. Approved. 9-0. Approved. Rubber stamp. Approved. Nobody even asked the questions. And they're obvious questions. They're obvious areas of concern that happened. Nobody even asked the question. What did they spend the 9 hours talking about? And then there's no notes on the executive sessions. As is mentioned here, we had to rely on individuals who kept some notes and some of their personal opinions on what happened. Even in the government, I mean, we're releasing what happened on our spy agencies with Russia after 25 years in excruciating detail. Even if it's a private thing, you keep excruciating details on record. We all do. Now, maybe this was on record. Maybe everything was documented, but by mistake, they put it on Snapchat instead of in the computer, so it disappeared in 2 seconds. Maybe that happened. I don't think so. There's no documentation of anything. There are decisions being made before the board even knew what was going on, with the meetings of the board being nothing more than please rubber stamp what's already been decided. And I'll go back to the Russian analogy and what I said in May of 2016. It's on the tape. I do not work for state Fulkerson. The board does not work for the CEO. The board does not report to the commissar. That's not how we're supposed to run. And I think one of the people in the forums last week discussed that. It's the members first, the board second, the CEO third, and the staff fourth. That's the structure. And in this case, the board was basically missing in action. And it was almost by design that they wanted them to be missing in action. This is completely and totally unacceptable. And yes, there's a lot of accountability that I want answered to. And the bad news for time purposes is that I'm only about 5% into the points I have here and everywhere else from spending 2 entire days working with members and Sherry and some other people trying to get to the bottom of all this. And Tammy, thank you for an absolutely outstanding report. Tell Terry that, please, and anybody else that worked on it. And I don't have an unmarked copy, but when I get one, please submit it as part of the record. I second it. I'm actually going to add to it, but this report represents my opinion on what happened and what should happen. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ray.
I have to say that Ray, I support your right to express your opinions, but I just find it really, I don't think the derogatory sort of name-calling of Kate is acceptable. I understand you're upset, and I accept that you need a way to express that, but I want to just go on record as saying I object to that strongly.
I object to derogatory name calling too. I'm merely saying that in both Stone Turn report and rest of 2020, and any analysis I've done with anybody, it is clear. What I just said is factual.
I don't believe
It's
that she is the
And they said the CEO did this. It's in here specifically. Not maybe they did it, not we think they did it.
I'm
They're
referring
saying
to
they did it.
referring to the commentary about the Russian.
Why is it wrong?
It's just derogatory. That's all. I don't think it's. I'm just saying.
I'm sorry
okay.
if the fact is
You are.
derogatory.
It
The
is not a
structure is
fact. She's not a
exactly that
freaking
way.
Russian, and we're not in communist Soviet Union.
It doesn't matter whether we are or not.
It does.
This particular organization is established and operated under the exact same methodology that they use. That's what I'm saying. I'm not calling anybody
In your
a communist.
opinion-
I'm not calling anybody.
In your
anything.
opinion, I understand that's what you're saying. I
Okay?
just say that I
Then
think
look
that
at it.
it's.
And look at how it operates and look at the structure, and then you tell me that you disagree with it.
I disagree with you.
Good. You don't even know what it looks like. You don't even understand what I'm saying, but you disagree, and that's fine. You have a right to. But there's going to be a lot of other people in here and out there that don't disagree with me.
I'm just saying that the name calling is not.
I'm not
helpful.
name calling anybody.
Sounded so much like that.
Well, it sounded to you because you're extremely defensive, and maybe there's a reason for that too. There was no name calling. I'm citing what the report said as facts.
Okay, can we move on?
I wanted to move on.
Okay. Can we move on?
Sure.
I turn to Janine. Thoughts on the report, thoughts on gaps, thoughts on moving forward.
Okay. I thought the report was well done, and I was very happy to hear from both you and Eric how pleased you were working with Stone Turn. I was impressed with them when we interviewed them, so I'm glad that they fulfilled their promise of professionalism. I think that when we started this project, there was a lot of discussion about what the purpose of it was. And the transaction cannot be undone or unwound or made to go away. We are dealing with the situation as we found it. And I think the most productive thing to do right now is to look at those gaps that became evident in, as you mentioned, Michael, a fairly unique and new transaction. Say that this was a maturing incident for the organization. And as you said, with a lot of things being 50 years old, we're probably going to face some of the same infrastructure issues as a lot of the country right now. And so we have to learn project management. We have to learn perhaps some different accounting skills, as they point out here, in terms of tracking expenses. I don't know a lot about how the committee operated, and I was fascinated to hear your comments about that, Ray, because I was wondering how, who was running some of those choices about the contractors and the expenses. So I think that was very interesting. I think that this document provides a record of what happened for us going forward as a learning document. And we can sit here and second guess the opinions that were made then, or look for people to blame. But I think what we really need to do from a productive point of view is just to make sure that this damn well doesn't happen again. And I think that's the best gift that we can give to the members of the association and all the people that live in Reston, that we go, you know, we screwed up. And it was an expensive learning lesson, but this is what we're going to do to make sure it never happens again. And if we sit back and spend too much time trying to pick some of the things apart, I think we may lose the impetus of moving forward. And that's, you know, that's really what I would like to see here. Because every day, in every way in this organization, we're making decisions that in small ways can replicate some of the mistakes we made here. So I would certainly like to see the present board start to move forward with some of the things that were discovered here. And they can always be updated or expanded upon, but I think if we wait until new board members get oriented and settled into their jobs, we risk losing the momentum and we risk not doing things. You know, if the new board thinks that the conflict of interest statement doesn't go far enough, they can always come up with a better one. And those sort of things are always learning experiences anyway. You've got some model conflicts in front of you. I can probably, on my phone, get you half a dozen more from other organizations. And, you know, we take our lessons learned. We move forward in a productive way. There are a couple of gaps that I saw in this final report that I would like to see an answer to. And I mentioned them to you, Michael. I think that I would like to know a little more about this whole, the instructions to the Land Use Council and how that happened. And I looked up the patch thing quickly while you were talking. And I think they agree with that. And I think the members want whatever more information we can get. And we're trying to, you know, a year later, 2 years later, recreate what happened. But I think if we can offer a little more information about how all that happened, I think it would be very helpful. And I think that the issue you raised, Ray, was important, and that was this working group a real model for future working groups, or do we need to make sure that the charters of future working groups are very clear on their powers and their abilities? Because it looks like somebody wasn't watching the bottom line on that, on the renovation. So you've got those two problems there. I think we have a real good list of things we need to do, and I think we need to prioritize starting on those immediately so we don't have any future incidents. I applaud Kate for taking the initiative of some other suggestions too on how to organize this and how to make our organization work better going forward in the future, because that's really all we can do right now, is make sure this doesn't happen again.
Thank you, Janine.
Thank you, Janine.
Very helpful.
I want to, one of the themes that came out at me through the Stone Turn investigation and their forensics is Ray touched on this, a board being led by the nose, a board being driven by decisions that are made either as a subset of the board or without the board making a decision and being presented as a fait accompli at the end. And so one of the, to me, there's kind of a meta recommendation, right? In the sense that the board has not asserted itself through this process. That the board received actions that already took place, received just the results of things that were happening outside of the purview. Part of the healing process from this, when we get to that point, and I agree there's some gaps that we still need to investigate, is going to be the board saying, we're driving this, and we are being patient and thoughtful before we just rush into something. My nervousness with this March meeting is if we all tune in and we've already got the staff recommendations and the board looks at them and says, hey, that sounds great, everything is going forward, we're good to go, let's start healing. It's going to suggest exactly what the report says, that the board has not taken that on. It will look again that the staff has given them a quick answer, they can declare a quick victory. I think there's some things that can be done right away. And it's not to say all or nothing, right? But I think a lot of this is going to be the sort of thing that we need to take time as a community to think about. And the board, this board and the next board that comes in April, think about how it asserts its role. I mean, it is the voice of our membership, right? It is the elected body of our membership, and that org chart it is exactly that. It's members, board, staff, and there are a lot of people in our community that think that that's reversed. And I think that one of the strongest things the board can do is show that it is not reversed, and find ways to demonstrably show it. My thoughts.
Gaps, and how do we handle the public meeting?
So the public meeting, the public meeting is going to handle itself in a way. The last one we tried to structure it, and we tried to focus, the membership comments on providing information for Stone Turn, and it turned into a bit of a bloodletting. And there were some very constructive comments. There was some bloodletting. There was some stuff that was off topic, right? We're gonna have to endure some of that anyway. And part of why we're enduring that is people just want to be heard. They feel like they haven't been heard. They want to be heard, and so it's an opportunity for them to say something. I think it's okay. I think we have to do that. I think what we should ask them is just what we asked ourselves, right? Gaps. What are the unanswered questions? The process of the renovation, the process of the appraisal, to me, are large gaps that need more work. I think nobody I've spoken to yet is satisfied with the appraisal section of this report. I think also the proffer issue probably needs some more investigation as well. The Comstock $350,000 proffer from 2010, and then the $300,000 fee, you know, for the residents, probably needs to be fleshed out some more. And there may be others that I haven't heard yet, and I think that that's what we should try to do at the forum. You know, what are your questions? What questions do you still have for us? And let them, I mean, let them, you know, we've got a lot of smart people. Let them drive that. And then we can take that on. You know, you as a board, us as a community. And, you know, and then that's the thinking point. Say, okay, you know, after you take all of that, you know, then think about how, you know, take a pause, figure out how to implement that, figure out what do we need, what, you know, 2020 suggested, do we need a, you know, a new body to look at some of these questions that just aren't going away? Do we need, you know, maybe some of these recommendations, you know, get changed by a thoughtful board with perspective on it that says, you know, instead of the way they wrote this, because they had 12 business days, right? I mean, and they did an outstanding job, and they were wonderful. I don't want to take that away from them at all. But it was quick, you know, by people who don't have a lot of perspective on resting. You know, the board does, and the membership does. And so that's a group that can take these and say, well, maybe this should be this way instead. Maybe this should be that way. And so I think that's part of the second half of my plea for some time on that. But as for the session on the 14th, which will almost certainly not be on the 14th, I think let's focus on gaps, the unanswered questions, yeah, and see if we've got some themes.
Okay, very good, thank you. Steve?
I agree with a lot of the comments that you made, particularly with Janine, and some of Eric and Hart. One place I do disagree a little bit with Janine is that, as I see it, and I haven't totally, I've studied the report, but I haven't studied what really went on before. But I think it's not the committee's responsibility, the city committee, the committee that was supervising the district.
Right.
I don't think that's their job. I think it's the board's job. And if the board abdicated their responsibility, that is not unusual in a volunteer organization that maybe's gotten a whole lot bigger than it was at one time. And maybe the board governance needs to change a little bit. I know that I served on a board and then on an executive board where we changed executive directors because we had millions of dollars shortfall. We came in and turned things around, and we came in with a new executive director, and the board closed their eyes and didn't watch what was going on, and before you know it, we were $8 million short, and nobody stole anything. We were just not paying attention. People who were supposed to be paying attention weren't paying attention. And I suspect that in any kind of voluntary organization, that when you have volunteer board members, that sometimes it's difficult to really appreciate and understand the responsibility of a member of the board. And I haven't seen any 2012 report, I don't know what it says, but I wonder whether or not some side committee should look at ways to either streamline how the board operates, or maybe, maybe this already goes on, I don't know what kind of education there is for board members when they come on the board as to what kind of responsibilities they really have. I suspect that it's like a lot of voluntary community organizations, there's not much of one. It's kind of like you come on and some other board members tell you some things or meet with you and you get some information, and you don't realize the responsibility of running a multi-million-dollar operation and the obligation to oversee it. And it's not like a profit-making company, because it's just not. It's a community and a responsibility back to the community. I would agree with some of the comments that Eve made, though, that no matter what you do and no matter what you say, there are going to be people that are never going to be satisfied. The nature of this community is a sort of democracy, and the essence of a democracy is dissent. People who are satisfied and happy are not going to step forward for the most part. They're not going to go out of their way to make sure they get to the meeting. The people who are going to go out of their way, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, are the ones who are angry or upset. And that's not to say that they don't have good comments, some of them, and things that should be put in perspective. But again, I think that perhaps the board needs to look at itself and see if that's where the problem would emanate from, and that they need to see what they can do to make sure that it's less likely that it happens again. Perhaps Eric's comments were make sure it never happens again. That's not the real world. In the real world, maybe we can make it less likely it happens again. If there is a board liaison, that board liaison's got a responsibility to keep the board apprised of what's going on. That board liaison has an obligation to know what's going on with a particular committee. And if they're spending a lot of money, maybe the committee chairperson has to be in each board meeting telling them. I mean, I don't know the answers to those things. I'm just suggesting, again, that goes to process. And Stone Turn talked about process. I don't know that they really talked about the process of the board. Ultimately, it falls on the board's shoulders, in my opinion. I see nothing that, anything that's been discussed that says somebody had any animus, that there was some intent here to deceive. I know Ray raised questions, and maybe there was some, but I've not seen anything that tells me there is. What I've seen is essentially quiet abdication of responsibility, which is not unusual or abnormal in voluntary association. Those are it.
I'd like to, as along with Mike, longer serving board member than I intended. So I think that there is some absolute truth in that. Not, the board is in many ways overtaxed. I can't remember when we broke into the board governance and board operations committees.
About a year ago,
It's been a little longer than that, I think,
Yeah.
but in an effort to be able to accomplish more with the people that we have. But Ray, I was thinking back on the timeline of materials and who knew what when overruns were. All the materials are posted. I mean, it's all out there. But yes, I will tell you, I did not go read the book. It's, working on board governance, that was enough. If there's an emergency, typically that you do get, you hear about that. The board, I think, has worked hard at developing education for incoming board members because it's a challenge. It is really hard to communicate the scope of responsibility that you take on when you take on this job. And, in the last sessions we ran were even sort of by a director who, was just sort of tired of it and wanted it over, so, yeah, I think the challenge is going to be finding a way to let people feel like they're heard, but like I said, we're never going to change the results of
Right.
X, Y, and Z. There's no going backwards. So if the end game is to hang a few people, then,
Right. Agreed.
I don't think that's, I hate to think that that's where we're going.
I've got to say, from someone who's spent a lot of time working with nonprofit boards, I am in awe of the scope of what this board has to do, because you were running a multi-million-dollar nonprofit with a relatively small staff, except, the few seasonal people, but the basic core staff is pretty small to run an enterprise of this size. And what happens is the board, instead of operating up here, and the analogy people usually use with nonprofit boards is nose in, fingers out. And that is nose in to make sure nothing bad's happening, but you shouldn't be making the day-to-day operational decisions for the organization. And that's a hard line to figure out what it is, particularly when you're dealing with a relatively small board, a small staff, to get an awful lot done. So maybe Reston needs a bigger board so you can divide into more committees so that the committees can then take accountability. And when a committee is given an accountability, that committee has a responsibility to make sure that the full board knows what they need to know and doesn't get bothered with the stuff they don't need to know. So you're not defeating your purpose of having committees. That may be something to think about in the future. But I'd like to throw something out, and I'll throw it out with our members here too. Has the board considered, on the basis of this report, and I'd like you to think about it, saying, we're a volunteer board and we work very hard, but obviously we didn't meet our own standards here and we'd like to apologize. And I'm wondering if an action like that might help a healing process. I don't know.
I think it's
Yeah, I mean,
very
I'm just
interesting.
looking for ways to heal here, because as I said, we can't, I mean, short of hanging some people on, that's short-term satisfaction that doesn't solve the problem.
well, and also has the risk of really robbing the membership of,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not a good road to go down. If there is no actual,
It's demoralizing.
it's not just demoralizing, I think that it's,
It's not who we are.
To follow what Janine said earlier, which I think was a follow-up on some of the things I said, perhaps one of the things that the board should do is look at, after being come down from this, appointing some kind of committee which would include members of the board and non-members, similar to this was, to evaluate board governance and how maybe things should change, and maybe make some recommendations for some changes. Whether that needs to happen or not, I don't know. Maybe that's happened. I mean, I don't know, maybe you've done that recently.
I'm not laughing at you, Steve. It's just that the governance committee has been disrupted meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting for all things other than governance. It has become like.
Well,
the place-
governance-related.
Governance-related activities,
issues.
that's right. We've not been able to do a conflict of interest, we've not been able to do a code of conduct, Not, because that meeting has become the place where people come to sort of go, oh, hey, let's talk about, you know, whatever. And so, you know, if members show up, then, you know, obviously they get to,
My comment was a little different. My comment was an ad hoc committee purely for the purpose of saying, should we restructure the way we operate?
Yeah. I'm getting hands from the audience. Just want to get Ray, and if the
Thank you.
committee is okay, what we'll do is we'll take comments from the community afterwards.
Thank you. First, on what Eric was saying, the context of the next meeting should be totally geared to the membership. How we're going to come up with any conclusions and recommendations out of all of this at the same day that we're hearing comments, and on the schedule it has the comments afterwards, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. The next meeting should be only the members. What are your questions? And it's not a matter of, quote, we want them to feel like they're being heard, unquote. No, we want them to know that they're being heard, and that they know that they are being listened to, and that when I invite somebody over my place to discuss these reports and we take notes on it, that I'm not doing it to make them feel better or to make me feel better. We're really trying to get information, and we're really trying to put positive things together. And it was all positive. This rest of the 2020 report was the most positive report I've read in a long time. So, I don't even know how we can consider moving into any kind of solid recommendations, especially with the board that's not been involved in this, until we hear from the members and absorb the comments and listen to them and think about them and see how we can absorb them into what we do. We haven't done that since I've been here. We're getting a lot better at it. A lot of board members are kicking and screaming that we're better at it. And a lot of what's talked about as disruption, I look at more from the perspective of a Google or an Apple, where creative disruption is what they're looking at. Some of the things that we're talking about disruption at the Board Governance Committee have resulted in some of the most positive actions of this board over the last year. I am really glad it happened. I'm really glad the member comment period is my favorite part of all these meetings. I want to hear what people are saying. Number two, what Steve's saying, that the board needs to look at itself, which I've been saying for a long time. And I've been criticized endlessly for a long time as if that's a negative statement to make about a board. Of course it's not, and you know that. And it feeds into number one. If we don't listen to the members and absorb what they're saying and then have some kind of give and take with them before we ever decide on anything, how are we ever going to look at ourselves? I mean, a part of looking at yourself is not to sit together as 9 people. Oh, let's huddle. And, you know, maybe we could turn a little bit here, maybe turn a bit there, and put a few more charts together and everything will be fine. No. No, I've been fighting this forever. And now I see a lot of support coming along with good ideas on how to do this. We listen to the members, we absorb what they say, and we look at ourselves. And this is the ideal time to do it. We have 4 new people coming in. There's an election now. Let the people hear what these candidates are saying, rather than that they kiss babies at Giant, or they hand out brochures. You know, who cares? I want to know what they're going to do. And this is a good way to get it out there. The statement was made that about demoralization. And we work so hard. I've been hearing this stuff about volunteer organizations as an excuse every time we, or a working group, or any of these staffs do anything wrong. We talk about, oh, we're just volunteers. You can't expect too much out of us. We're just volunteers. Well, don't run. Don't be on the board. And if we're so overtaxed, why did you take 9 hours within a 10-week period have executive sessions on top of everything else. And then tell me you don't even remember what was said in these 9 hours. I don't get it. That doesn't sound like somebody who's overtaxed. Somebody who's overtaxed is saying, let's get the heck out of here. And lastly, this thing about shooting people and killing people down and let's not go after anybody is a direct affront to Stone Turn and Rest in 2020 and everybody else. We're talking about accountability here. A lot of things were done wrong, whether there was any animus or not, for whatever reason, and there was some personal reasons why a lot of the stuff was done. It needs to be thoroughly vetted. And if we're a board of directors, you can read the Wall Street Journal every day, at least twice a week, the board of directors is taking action against a CEO or a key member of it because it's their job to do so. They're supposed to overlook things. They're supposed to examine the details. They're supposed to listen to stockholders and customers and get feedback. And if they figure that the CEO is not operating correctly or anybody else along that chain is not operating correctly, it's out. And it's probably out at the same meeting. And we're talking about all of this stuff that's in here, and it's amazing. If anybody wants to read this in any kind of detail at all, they should be shocked and amazed by it, that you're going to tell me that if I say that we should hold somebody, and I'm not even naming that person, because there's a lot of stuff in here, that if we find that somebody was out of line, doing something that's over the top, or that needs to be reprimanded, that I'm being a mean guy, and I'm beating them down, and I'm calling them a communist or a fascist or whatever else you're going to tell me I'm calling them when I'm not. We're talking about holding people accountable. And there are so many unanswered questions here. I need to hear from the membership at the next meeting. I need to hear from Terry. I want to know what's really in this report. Give me the details, and not in 3 minutes. He's going to need more than that. He's not one of the people I talk with this weekend. I need to talk to him and find out what's going on behind this, how he sees it, et cetera, and so do all of us. Most people will not do that. They will not want to do that. They will reject that. They will insulate themselves from that. I'm not going to. Sherry won't. Most of the people running for this board, from what I can tell, they're not going to do that. And so we're going to have a new order in here in a month, which is a good thing. And if you want to call that disruptive, yeah, it's disruptive to the status quo. And to me, it's the status quo that's demoralizing, not us sitting here vetting the facts. And it would be extremely demoralizing to me, and I think extremely demoralizing to most of the membership, if we sat here and did nothing and said, oh, let's just forget about it and move forward, meaning forget everything that happened and just go forward, let's put this plan in, and if the plan is in, of course, the people will act better next time, and all will be well, and everything's here, and if we need to just add some more bureaucracy and add a few more committees, we'll do that, and that will solve everything, which is totally the wrong answer. You know it, I know it, most of the people know it. It's time to just look at ourselves, as Steve says, factual, honestly, with the help of people who are looking at us. I had a lot of comments about some of the members too, but Erwin, don't take that personally, please. And you neither, Arlene. It's all part of the process. If we're going to have open, honest dialogue, comments are going to be made among people and between people. And that's just going to happen. And it needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray.
Okay,
Kate.
sorry, I mean, it's been one hell of a year. I've been purposefully quiet since May when all of this came out because for a number of reasons. One, I wanted the board and the community to have its process. I totally respect that. I believe that I'm a person of integrity and character. I am a resident as well. I've lived here for a long time, and I've worked here for a long time, and I've seen a lot over the years. When I took this position, I knew that I wasn't going to keep everything the same. I knew that there were a lot of broken parts within this organization. We were overall okay, but we weren't operating where we should be. And to move from a position here to a position up here and have the ability to look down and see all of it and uncover, open up a rock and see it and go, there's something. I'm not one to pull up a rock and put it down and ignore it. You can't. You have to do something about it. The volume of changes that have been made internally are not seen to the general public. I hope they're felt by the general public and the way they're treated when they come into member services, in the way our facilities are beginning to look, in the fact that we're actually doing our duty in covenants administration and trying to change the image of how we interact with our members when they're trying to buy or sell or make a repair to their house. How we go about doing our programming. How we were dealing with finance issues. How we were communicating with members. There is not much that I haven't seen, but it does not change overnight. I have not been asked by anybody, with the exception of Stone Turn, what I think. I have done my best to get my board's attention to say, I've got problems and I need help. But I'm not being listened to, and that's a problem. When I stand several times in front of my board in the summer of August 2015 and say, I've got a problem with capital, a major issue to the point where I feel like I need to put new processes in place because I'm not comfortable with how dollars are being spent or projects are being done. Nobody was listening carefully to me. And the fact of the matter is, I had no idea that the number that was in the pro forma was wrong, because I trusted my subject matter experts on staff to give me a logical number. And it wasn't until we were going through the process with the community group that I said, oh my God, this was wrong too. That should tell you something. When I say, oh my God, this was wrong too, that tells you that a whole bunch of other stuff is wrong. I believe when you're running an organization that you try to give the people that work for you every opportunity to succeed. I've learned that that works, and then sometimes it doesn't, but you have to go through a process. And I can usually smell when something's going to fail, but I have to go through a process. I've got to give somebody the opportunity to turn it around. There's been turnover in my senior leadership team for a reason, with the save one, with the CFO. I had a great hire. I have a great hire now too, two totally different people, but the other one got taken away for more money, and I can't do anything about that when you're in a nonprofit that we are. I'm not done, is all that I'm going to say. Separate and apart from this, there are other things that have come to my attention that I need to address. And I'll tell you what, changing staff ain't easy, especially when people have been in place for a number of years and they've come up with processes. And even though I've been here for a number of years, I'm not afraid to do things differently. But I also need leadership that listens. I try very hard, regularly, to say, here's what I got going on internally and what I need your time and attention on. We've got an issue coming up. It's coming down the pike. I need your time and attention on it. There's a lot to be done. I put out a a laundry list of an implementation plan because I care about this organization. There are problems that need to be fixed. Some of the stuff I knew about, frankly, you know, as my new CFOs were coming on, and now my new capital director, and it's like, wow, there's a lot of stuff that we need to deal with. A lot of stuff that's being uncovered that me, running an organization, I don't have time to lead every different directorate. I don't have time to do that. I rely on subject matter experts. And when I learned that someone has failed me, not just once, but several times, I'm not afraid to make a decision, to make a change, as my staff have come to learn me say, to change the card out for a new one. Changing 40 years of walking in one direction is not easy. I have on several occasions apologized for what's happened with Tetra. If I could go and redo the process, I would. I would. Some of it is borne by the governing documents. Some of it is being put in a situation that we've never had before. Did I learn a lot? Absolutely. Do I want to change? Absolutely. I really hope that whatever happens, that we can move forward on it. And I hope that at some point in time, I'm given an opportunity in a little less public venue to have a conversation with my board about the challenges that I have internally and that I'm dealing with on a daily basis. And I appreciate Janine's comment, with the staff that I have. I don't have a vast staff. I've got certain resources available to me, and I do the best with what I've got in the time that I've got. I'm still constantly amazed when I look up at 5 o'clock and it's about time to go and everybody's left, and I'm thankful because I now have desk time to think and not react. And then I need to go home to my family and make dinner or see what my 12-year-old is up to, help with math and science or whatever the case might be. And I'm very proud of her. She got a letter in the mail to make application for the Junior National Honor Society this weekend.
Congratulations.
So I'm proud of her for that and all the things that she's involved in. I need my board to listen because I'm not interested in rubber stamping. I'm not interested in being the leader of the Politburo. I'm interested in a partnership with a board that can help guide me and the rest of the organization and community. I don't have all the answers. I never professed to. I'm sorry, but it's been a long year. And I'm doing my best to move the organization and the community in a positive direction. There's a lot to be done. There's a lot going on with land use. There's a lot to be done with Fairfax County. I need help. Transportation. There's a lot to be done in governance. And I do believe we need to focus on how this board governs ourselves. I say we because I'm usually the one who has to help implement whatever you decide to do. And we had a retreat last year that last May, that we're just now talking about. There's a lot of things that need to be implemented there. We put a code of ethics on hold that could have gone forward even without additional contracting dollars. I think it's a code that's desperately needed. I've got a staff that's afraid. It should be. But at the same time, they're having a hard time keeping their love and interest for doing the best they can for the community up here. When they see how the board members treat each other, when they see how the community interacts with them, with the board, and when they see how the board treats staff. It's hard. Thanks for giving me a moment to speak.
Thank you for that, Kate. Let me just share a couple things, then I will turn it over to our members. I joined the board just over 5 years ago. I was actively involved for previous 4 years on the Environmental Advisory Committee. The reason I ran is because I see this community in transition. At the time, Milton Matthews was the CEO, knew pretty soon that he was going to move on, and we had an opportunity to go forward. I've seen a lot of change within the organization, and I see even more change that this community is going to see. This board is seeing the situation as a snapshot in time, right? We're here, we're only stewards of the organization for a relatively short period of time, and I can say without question that my peers on the board have always committed to doing what they believe is best for the community and have contributed in the best way that they can. Really appreciated Kate stepping forward. We did have quite a number of very solid candidates, and Kate was one of them that wanted to be the chief staff lead here. And one of the qualities that Kate brought is just an absolute passion and commitment to the community. You don't often get that. My day job, I never thought as an engineer that my day job would be in a professional association, sort of work that you do today. And I figured that, you know, at some point in your career, you need to serve as well as a volunteer, and that's precisely what I'm doing here. Finding staff that are motivated, committed, loyal is a real challenge. We're fortunate in the staff that we have here. Were there mistakes made? Were there errors made? Absolutely. Could I, as an individual, have foreseen some of them? Absolutely. I did, and I raised it. But the fact of the matter is, I am one member of a board, and we as a board move forward, not as individuals. And I'm very much about process. As I said, we are a snapshot in time, and we've got to move forward. We have a unique perspective on the world currently in Reston, and we have a responsibility, because we are stewards, to take decisions in the best interest of the organization. And so we will get through this. The community will get through this. We have a responsibility as this committee to provide a recommendation to the board. We have a responsibility as a board to, at this point in time, make the best decisions we can in order to advance the organization in the interests of the community and the members. We've grown up a lot. This organization is only 50 years old. It's next to nothing in the scheme of things. The organization I work for is 175 years old, been around that long. We've got pretty established processes and whatnot, but they're always improved. And how do they improve? When something goes wrong, you look at it honestly, you look at it dispassionately, and say, this happened. You know, if the circumstance was not going to repeat itself, then you would handle things differently. But the fact of the matter is, we know we're going to find ourselves in having to make similar decisions, maybe even more important decisions. And so we need to address things now. Appreciate Kate. I appreciate the opportunity to serve with my peers on the board. I too do not see any malfeasance. I see an organization that's mature. Ladies before gentlemen, Erwin, let Arlene share, and then I'll take you.
Well, I'm sorry that you use the word that you don't see malfeasance, because the 2020 report that was released today, they do use the word malfeasance, and they do use words like conflict of interest, and even worse. And I have to tell you, because I'm really out there with the community for now almost 2 years constantly, the community is not pleased with this situation, and they use even stronger words than that. So you can't move forward. It's not going to happen. You can't move forward unless you get to the bottom of this and unless people are held responsible. That's what the community wants. They're not going to forget this, and they are going to dislike you more and more and more. Do you agree with me? So I believe that a thorough legal investigation is required, and people be held accountable.
Like we
The
should call the
community believes
police?
that.
I mean, I don't, I find it so, Arlene, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No,
but
I'm done.
It's like, with no disrespect at all intended towards 2020, my question is the supposition, I mean, the fact that someone uses the word malfeasance does not mean there has been malfeasance.
No, they want to check into it.
I-
That's all that means.
That's fine, I mean, but I would think that Stone Turn, who seems to be deep in that vein of investigation and has a great deal of experience, would have been able to ferret that out fairly quickly and easily. And again, I don't know, maybe there is no way forward, maybe that's it, maybe just, we should fire everybody, the board should resign, and, you can start fresh, I
That's
guess.
an
I mean-
exaggeration of what I said.
Well,
That's
Arlene,
ridiculous.
of course it is, but, when I was listening to the tape of the listening session for, I had to go back and listen over and over and over again to one person, but I am sure that what they said was that this was a cover-up of such magnitude that it required the hiring of a foreign-born CFO.
Well, cover-up is, the word cover-up is used.
That wasn't the horrifying part.
Yeah, that, I mean.
The horrifying part was foreign-born CFO, and I was like,
That's
okay.
kind of weird.
Well, so of course it is. So that I only say that to point out that, okay, so there's some people with some ideas that are never gonna get, sifted out, resolved, made happy, moved forward, okay? But, I mean, I am deeply concerned about how to have, what format should a public meeting take in which Stone Turn can be present, that isn't gonna cost us $1 jillion more, because, they are on the clock, in which, I mean, I'm just trying to imagine what that's gonna be like. Are they gonna be like, okay, I think it was it was too much money. Well,
That's not the question.
okay, so the question is, I believe that the instructions to the council maybe should be dug in.
The question is who benefited? That's the question. That's the question.
So let me just mention or comment on something you said. We can't move forward. Well, the fact of the matter is we're going to move forward at some point
Right.
in time.
At some point. in
At
time.
some point in
And I think you need to be very
Who
careful.
benefited?
Absolutely, and that's why we've spent an hour and a half here, and we'll probably spend another bunch of time at it. But there's a process that we need to get through. And it's a process where the board develops as an organization, we develop additional skills and expertise to satisfy the members in the community, give the members in the community confidence that the organization is looking after their interests.
People want to know who benefited in every aspect of this secrecy, who benefited.
I
That's
hear
what
you.
people want to know.
Arlene, I hear you.
You know what I mean, right?
I hear you. And I also know that it's entirely possible that nobody did,
Yeah.
and we're not going to satisfy certain people. And that's going to be a judgment call
They
by
just
this
wanted
board.
investigation, that's all. I'm not accusing anybody of anything. They just wanted to be investigated on that level.
Let me let Erwin speak.
I want to take a shot at this too before Erwin speaks. I think that what Arlene's saying, Arlene, correct me if I'm wrong, when she says we're not going to move forward, we're not going to move forward in the way prescribed by several people here. And the snickering and the laughing and all the rest can stop immediately, please. We're not gonna just say, oh, forget everything, we'll never do it again, now let's just move forward. I think that's what she's saying. It's not that we're never gonna move forward. In order to move forward, we need to build a foundation. And that foundation is going to be listening and hearing and paying attention to member commentary, even if it turns out that we're only listening in the end and acting on 10 or 20% of that commentary. I don't know how that's going to turn out. And it's better than we want them to feel like they're being heard. Oh, isn't that nice? No, I want to hear them. I want to listen to them. I spent a lot of my time this weekend doing that. I didn't do it for my health. I think that's what she's saying. Am I right or wrong?
Yep.
Now, there's the question of malfeasance. There's nothing in the 2020 report that said there was malfeasance.
They just used the word.
They used the term along with a lot of other terms in the same sentence that possibly this could have happened and it should be looked into.
Right.
Obviously, that's true. And it should be looked into and see if there was malfeasance or whatever other term they have in that sentence. I couldn't find it, Tammy, you'll find it for me at some point, I'm sure. But this whole report is filled with questions. Why did this happen? Who was responsible for this? When did this occur? Yeah, these are obvious questions that fill in the gaps and give the people a picture. And it might turn out that the picture is more positive to the RA board than we realize, that there are reasons why a lot of this stuff happened. The fact that we're acting so fearful about it and fighting it and saying, no, we don't want to do that, is leading everybody to think that there's a lot of guilty parties here. Just open it up and let's find out. We have Stone Turn did a great job. 20 people and a lot of others around them working around this are asking the exact same questions. They deserve answers. I deserve answers. I got some questions that are very serious questions. They deserve honest answers.
So what we're going to have to do as
So
a
excuse
board...
me, I'm not done yet. There's also this thing which I call the either-or mentality, which was a specialty of our former president, where you say something like the way Arlene did, and immediately somebody jumps on the other extreme and claims that you're representing some extreme, and that's the position, you know, like, oh, you think that we shouldn't move forward. Oh, you say we shouldn't move forward, nothing's going to happen, and what's going to, and that. It's a game that's been played here for 2 years, and we got to stop this either-or stuff. I want both and solutions. Maybe both of you have a point. Maybe if we combine them together in a both and put and of the 2 points together, we'll come up with better solutions than coming up with any time somebody makes any recommendation. You question their motivation, you tell me what they did 4 weeks ago when you saw them at some restaurant, or something else which either discredits the person or discredits the idea and puts it in an extreme position. You're either a communist or a fascist or a capitalist, and things like this. That's got to stop. This either-or stuff, every time somebody makes a recommendation, and maybe it's not exactly worded properly. When a member only has 2 or 3 minutes, or anybody has only 2 or 3 minutes to say something, they're not going to be quoted properly. It's easier to write. You can correct your own mistakes. Once you say something, it's tough to take it back, even if everybody knows what you meant. I know exactly what she was talking about. There was no need to ridicule, laugh, and jump on her for saying that. This happens all the time. And if we're going to really be serious about including membership, the board, the CEO, and everybody, and get on the same page in the same lane, we have to get off of that type of mentality and this type of not only name calling, but categorizing people. There's nobody on this board that has a more diverse voting record than I have. And I get accused of being with this person and being with that person. No. I've gone against what people say are my guys a lot of times. Much more so than other people who vote in straight blocks every single vote. And you can check the record if you want, every single time. We need to get in the same lane, and if it means that I'm on a completely different perspective, or somewhat different perspective, and Arlene or Tammy or Erwin on something, that's fine. They understand that that's the way democracy works. That's the way organizations should work. We're not group thinkers. There's a lot of difference of opinion among a lot of the people that people think have monolithic opinions on things, when in fact they don't. So if we include them all, and if we allow some open discussion within the board without categorizing people or having certain board members, particularly officers, conversing on a million different things, and let's keep this away from so-and-so and so-and-so, because we don't want them to disrupt our thinking. And pardon me, that not only happens, it happens a lot. I'm looking forward to 4 new board members and a new mentality, which has a both-and perspective on things, not an either-or perspective on things. I hope everybody agrees with me on that, and I hope we can, that's what I call moving forward, not forgetting about what happened and saying, well, let's just move forward. Thank you very much, Michael. I apologize. Go ahead.
You know, certainly, the board could consider as an action to investigate further, but the board has to recognize that there are going to be costs. There are going to be costs, certainly, in getting the necessary expertise, and there's also cost in terms of delaying other programming priorities and whatnot. And, you know, frankly, that should be put on the table. I shared in my earlier comments, I think a couple of times, that our role is to develop confidence in the community that we're representing their interests effectively. And when I talk about process, we have to go through a process to do that. And the discussion that we're having here today, the discussion we'll have in the subsequent meeting, 20th or whenever it happens, and the board meeting are all part of that. Us asserting our role as stewards of this organization and generating hopefully the confidence in the community that we're managing this organization, or overseeing the organization successfully. Erwin?
If I were to sum up what the board and this committee need to do, I would use one word, and that is listen. Listen carefully. The first group you have to listen to is the community. And it's not just for show. You have to hear and listen carefully to what they're saying. You have one example that you've received, which is the 2020 report. You'll get lots more in a meeting with the community. And you have to pay attention to what they're saying and how they're saying it. And then you have to synthesize it and take action. Because if you merely listen and then throw it in the basket or don't do anything, nothing happens as the result of having listened, then you will instill in them a lack of respect for the board, and they will no longer pay attention. They will do other things. And what you need is the support of the community if you want to accomplish things. And if the community, which expresses itself, because that's the community you need to pay attention to, the ones who express themselves, says you need to investigate these matters further and gives you examples of the areas they would like to investigate further, then you have no choice. You have to investigate. And they may point out things that may or may not exist. You won't know until you investigate. You cannot make a conclusion about whether you will find something or not find something until you actually conduct the investigation. Because that's the only way to know. The second person to whom you have to listen is Kate. She just told you this evening she has lots of problems. You need to know in some detail what those problems are. Because unless you know how your organization is functioning, you can't make it work. So you need to listen carefully to her and what her problems are and why they exist, how extensive they are, how they impact on the functioning of the entity and what it is that needs to be done in order to remedy that. She may have some answers. She may not have all of the answers. You may have to get additional expertise to help you. But that, in effect, is your job. When I say your job, I'm referring to the governance committee. That's what you're here for. And the third group you have to listen to is Stone Turf. They have told you, you need to implement the following procedures. They gave you a long list. This is not happening with a snap of a finger. It takes time to craft, carefully craft, and work through what those procedures ought to be as they adapt to this organization. That takes time, it takes expertise, and it may be exterior expertise that you need in order to accomplish that. I frankly do not see that expertise with the exception of one person on this committee. That one person is someone who is familiar with running an organization in that function, and that's Sharon. And she has a PhD in it. But you cannot shift that onto her completely because she has another job and a life besides here. So while she can be a leader in developing it, she needs to have someone actually doing the work. Or you need to have someone doing the work. And the four of you are not leaving. Whether you're leaving this committee or not, I can't tell you. That's in the future. But the four of you are going to be around. When I say the four of you, I mean the four members of the committee. So you need to take a look, a hard look, at what those recommendations are. And you can start moving towards their implementation now. You don't have to wait for input from the community. You don't have to wait for input from anybody else except experts in how you translate those recommendations into a reality. Written procedures that will be established, explained to the staff, and followed so that you avoid having this happen again, or continuing to happen, so that everybody knows, the board, the public, the staff, contractors, everyone. This is the way Reston does things. And they follow that strictly, stringently. And if you do not do that, then you are to be held responsible. When I say you, I mean the governance committee. It's your job. And that's the thing you want to be paying attention to now, because it's something you can do and institute, start now. You don't have to wait. Stone Turf has given you the map. Follow it.
Thank you, Vernon. Any other comments? Tammy?
I only comment from the aspect that I'm a 2020 person and I'm the only one here. But what I want you to understand is 2020 is an amalgamation of people. And it's an elegant solution organization because we have A to Z opinions or perspectives. This particular report took so long because every single thing in it was vetted. There's nothing in there that we're pulling out of thin air. So there are things that are not yet known. That is why in the conclusion, 3 words are mentioned. One is malfeasance. There were 2 others and some other comments. So I want to say from a personal standpoint, I have been involved in Reston development and planning for almost 9 years, almost full time. No normal person that's sane does that. Terry's the other one, and I'm not the only one. But we have an expertise collectively. I am by far the most, he's the most experienced, and then there are other people who have segments of it, because you're right, it is so complicated, no mere mortal can understand it all. And it keeps morphing and changing, and we're trying to deal with the county and et cetera. I have observed this woman, who I consider a hero, through years of process, evolving and trying to get answers, and I've never seen any instance in all the time I've known Kate that she's ever been lazy or did something that I thought, why did you do that? I have seen her at board meetings please give me guidance. If anything I could say to Kate is, Kate, you're the CEO. If you're at a meeting and you have to take a position for Reston Association, take it. Because your board are mere mortals that don't have this expertise. I would also say, use the people who have that expertise. I have come to Kate before meetings and say, does McBride know about this? They changed the standard. She goes, oh my God, talk to him. He didn't know, and you're paying him big bucks. And I'm not picking on him specifically, but that's, and it's not that we're going to be infallible. We're not, no mere mortal, and we're getting old and tired, and we're not going to be around forever. So I want to say on behalf of Kate, regarding Kate, in the discussions of the 2020 report, various people had various opinions about what happened and what might have happened. It's empirical data that's in that paper. And if Kate is mentioned, it's because the buck stops with her. It does not, in my view, and I will say this on camera, impugn her. It's because the buck stops with her. There's no one above her to blame. I post with my name. I don't post with an avatar. People post with these avatars and they say awful, horrible, shooting from the hip shit. And I hate that because it isn't fair and they hide behind their anonymity. And God knows why they're so vicious. And it's destructive to our community. I have spent 9 years working on this stuff because I love Reston. And we are under assault. What we love is going away. So when we have our HOA doing stuff that is so, we dug up stuff before the referendum and said, this is the truth, and it is still the truth, and that, pro forma documents were not right, we've proved it, you have a problem with that. And we have board members before, have left the board and currently sitting, who have worked their darndest to hide things, keep things secret. If you would have had the Media World Group, it would have been for free. There was no way. Of course, with $45,000 with Stone Turn charging $500 an hour, there's a limit to how many days they can work. Why, when you're getting the answers to a riddle, are you handicapping people on a day? I've got to have this by February 28th. Well, it's election season, folks. Tetra happened during election seasons. Other things that have happened before that aren't good have happened during election season. It's not rocket science. You are hiding stuff from the members over a long period of time so that we don't have input. We're aware of it. We are aware of it. I wouldn't care what you did as a board if I didn't feel that I've been kept away and things have been hidden from me. And it happens over and over. And it makes me crazy because some of the people hiding stuff have some really good ideas on occasion. And people would think, oh, Tammy wouldn't like that. You'd be amazed at what I like. But I don't say anything about it because the people are the ones hiding it. That's got to stop. 4 new people are coming in. And I hope this gets resolved. There must be changes if we're going to really move forward and grow an organization that is strong enough to do what RA has to do as times change. So I've taken up too much time, but
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Tammy. Anyone else?
Ben Ayer. So much has been said about healing and hindsight tonight. And I wanted to ask if you would be willing to voluntarily give a deposition type of sworn statement of the timeline, statement of facts, along with any electronic evidence to the public. Is that something you would consider? You don't have to answer me right now, but that's something, it's something for you to think about, because partly why the community is such is because they want closure. And when there are things that are being done, like stonewalling, a $1 bid by citizen subject matter experts, and having a stone term for $45,000, I think that makes members further believe that they're getting further away from transparency instead of going towards it. And I think it's only going to get worse if you call this particular study to be anything other than the philosophical review that it has been. If you call it anything like forensic analysis, because it is not. And if you try to rush the healing process or try to enforce that in any manner. But something I think that would help is if you could come up with something you could voluntarily provide. You were just talking about the cost in pursuing something like that, but a lot of that can be mitigated by just coming up with what your statement of facts are, along with any other material to substantiate that. That will allow the community to see what actually happened. And I think we could start off with the questions that are asked in the 2020 report. Those questions are in fact going to just corrode further into the frame of mind right now the community has. And if you can come up with voluntarily answering those questions, that would be a good start. And then further material to substantiate that will answer a lot of those questions.
Well, thank you for that. I am very comfortable standing behind the Stone Turn report. I think that the Stone Turn report, and I think frankly this committee could recommend that we adopt the report and forward it to the board. I don't think that we need to take any further action at this point. We'll hear from the community. I did specifically ask Kate to think about an implementation plan, and we made it absolutely clear that that is a draft implementation plan. We had purposely and intentionally asked you all to think about gaps. I asked Kate too to think about gaps. You know, you've gone through this experience. What have we missed that ought to be considered? And I think that we've all shared the gaps. This is being recorded. I know that'll end up in the implementation plan. So to your question, I stand behind the Stone Turn report. The Stone Turn report, my belief, is a true reflection of what had actually transpired and what I saw and know to be true. I haven't read the 2020. I don't know the questions, but so
I just my CFO and I had a conversation with our auditor BDO this afternoon. We wanted to give them time to read the report, give us their reaction, especially to the recommendations. And one of the things that I plan on adding to my own laundry list at the back is that we need to have someone come in and conduct a process, control, walkthrough, and review of our purchasing, our payroll, capital projects, and revenue, and how we handle all of those. So while not called out, that is something that we feel like needs to be done within the organization. And I'm going to try and get a cost estimate on what that will take to happen, because that can't happen with the current staff. So I just wanted to let you know that I plan on further refining, you know, kind of what's in here. There are definitely some things, several points that were made that can't be done on our own. We need professional help in order to get it done, to look at it from a different perspective and put best practices in place. That may cost money. So I just
no, I appreciate
wanted to
that.
let you know that.
Kate, and just to put it out there, and I know Eric and I had talked about this as well, that, this is a moving forward, develop a plan that generates the confidence that we need from the community to go forward, is going to take effort and resources, and it means the board needs to see this as a priority. I know Kate sees it as a priority. There may be additional resources that we need externally to be able to flush them out and develop them and have the board approve them and go forward. But I think in terms of today, I'd like you to consider at least accepting the Stone Turn report and forwarding it on to the board for further consideration. I know that we're now past the allotted time. We haven't addressed the other items that we have on the agenda, but before we leave, I'd like to get your agreement on how we handle the community meeting. There were some suggestions about providing member comments immediately after Stone Turn presents a very quick summary. I did have a chance to speak with Dee, and she felt that she would spend no more than 10 minutes just orienting folks on the report and would leave the rest of the time, frankly, to the community and the board to decide how best to handle it.
Janine, brought up a couple of things that she felt were missing, and I think that, depending, I haven't looked outside lately to see whether or not we're going to have more time, I think that Stone Turn should address those things. You enumerated some things that were maybe some gaps that they didn't fill in. I don't know if that requires more research, or, I got the impression that you were like, here's this, but what does that mean and what's the goal? So I wasn't sure if you wanted to take some of that up and have them...
Today?
Or have them do that in advance of the meeting and make any corrections, or if you wanted to completely wait. I don't know.
I've raised the
It's wet and
items
snowy.
the items that I mentioned, and it's items other people have brought up. I still don't think we have a full handle on what happened with the valuation and how that all came to be. There was the attachment of the letter, but I still don't have any idea who came up with those initial instructions and how that happened.
So
And I
you're
know
talking
that-
about the
I know that's one of the
instructions to
things that when
council?
people in the committee talk, in
Right.
the community talk to me, and I've heard the
Yep.
same thing from you
To
today.
the
Nobody really
2020 report as well.
understands what happened.
Instructions to the council, and I believe that's instructions to council.
So I would call
How
it-
did that happen?
I call those issues, if you want, gaps in what needs to be done. And I frankly don't think that, we need to recommend anything on that. I think that the basic issue is, what are the additional
Right.
gaps that we need to consider?
Okay.
And I think that, for the record, I think we ought to include the suggestions that Janine has made, and frankly, any others as well. But in terms of the meeting on the...
Now, you did ask, I apologize, process. You asked a question of this group if it was ready to accept and recommend forward to the board. I don't know if that action is done yet, before you go into just the,
Well, should we make a motion?
do
Do I have a motion?
You're talking about just accepting the
That was
report
what
output?
you asked,
Yes.
and I want to make
So-
sure that that's what you all want to do, or if you're not comfortable doing that, that should be known too before you get onto the agenda.
I think, yeah,
Want to make a motion?
I move that we accept the
Stone Turn
the
report?
Stone Turn report and forward it to the board of the member. Well, it's already been forwarded to the membership. So.
But we accept the report. Ray, second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Is that unanimous then?
Yeah.
Unanimous.
All-
I don't
everybody
think
here?
we get to vote. We're not-
Okay, so it's
Yeah.
just the
We're
three of
the
us?
governance.
Okay.
We're advisory.
Gotcha.
Hmm?
That's why I paused and asked, because I wasn't sure.
I'll throw in that I met for a long time with Sridhar this weekend. He has no problems with the Stone Turn report. there's questions about Media World and all that. That's there, everybody knows. We have the Stone Turner report. The Media World people are welcome to comment, ask questions, and they're willing to do so. They're happy to do so, and they will do so. But as far as they're concerned as well, Stone Turner report is good, let's go with it.
Good, thank you. There's no reason we couldn't have you all vote on moving it forward. Do you have any issue,
The only thing, I
concern?
mean, I don't have an issue at all. I would say that I think the Stone Turn report is part of a body of information that the board should take on as it starts to think through this. The member, gaps and comments from the session on the 14th, right, which you probably will move. Other inputs from the community and some of the Media World folks I know have done some great homework on the timeline, and some of the stuff around the appraisal. There's a body of, this should be part of that body, right? I mean, they crunched numbers, they rolled up their sleeves, they looked at, they looked at ledgers, they looked at, they followed dollars and cents from the very beginning of this to the end, right? They looked at invoices, contracts, all those sorts of things. That's useful for us, right? The forensic piece is useful for us. Their scope of work was directed towards process, and so their report reflects that, but it also reflects the number crunching they've done. There are gaps. I think we need to hear from the members about those gaps. We've talked about a couple of them already. Some others have surfaced. But as part of that body of information that the board will need to absorb and crunch, right?
Deliberate on.
And deliberate. I think this is a great piece of that puzzle.
Great. Steve, you agree?
I totally agree with that.
Janine? Yep. All right, so we acted on that. Kate? We go to the agenda for the public meeting. We prepared a draft, it was included here. Any thoughts on the sequencing? There were suggestions that we ought to have member comments immediately following Stone Turn.
Certainly makes sense to me, I
I would think so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else you're
They will
going
be
to
really,
be like,
Are they
this will give us a
questions?
laundry list of any
Right.
other gaps.
Are they questions that are going to be answered or comments? There's a big difference.
Well, I think that this is going to get very technical, and I think what would be most helpful is for folks to consider the recommendations in the report and identify other gaps that ought to be considered.
well,
Um,
I think her point is good. I mean, it's like, what are, you don't want,
It's not that technical.
well, you don't want people to leave feeling like it's just more of the same,
Yeah.
which I think is a significant risk. And I think, but on the other hand, it's not like Stone Turn is going to be able to, necessarily pull something out of an addendum and say,
Right.
here's the answer, you just missed it in your review.
Right.
Doesn't this make you happy? Because I'm
Stone
guessing.
Turn has what they have. I mean,
That's
this
right.
isn't going to change.
Right,
Right.
exactly. So
Yeah.
that kind of gets back to that.
So they could certainly answer questions about what they did, how they did it, and what they found.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
But
It'll be
that's-
less
yeah.
negative. People can ask questions rather than
Yeah.
insult you.
Well, what I don't want is, I don't want the board, I don't want Stone Turn to provide answers that they really don't have the answers
Well, then
to.
they can
Right.
say-
That's just not, that's right.
I think it'll be more civilized, and I think it'll be easier to handle if people get to ask questions. I really do.
Yep. So, do we need to, and I'm going to ask the committee here, do we need to change the description here? Do we have to change? We certainly will move item F under C. So that is the member comment. And we'll shift down, and I would suggest let's have a full hour for member comment. Chances are we may need more, but let's at least plan an hour and then just shift the timing for the rest of the items.
I think the length of member comments, unfortunately, is gonna depend on how many people wanna comment, how much
Absolutely.
time people
Yeah.
have. So it's almost gonna be, there's an hour, there's
It's
30
usually,
people here,
it's usually
that's 2
three,
minutes.
it's
If
usually
there's
3 minutes
10
as a
people,
policy.
so it might be great if people could encourage people to get together and perhaps have a spokesperson or something.
Or coordinate the comments.
Yep.
The comments shouldn't be
Yeah.
repetitive.
But that's exactly right,
That's
you know, and
exactly
we
right.
shared that.
That is a problem, and I think meetings, you know, people don't want to.
You know, sometimes I'll sign up to make a comment or ask something, and then somebody else will do it, and I'll say, no, it's already been answered. I've seen a lot of people do that.
No, and certainly would appreciate that,
Yeah, I mean,
because
yeah.
I
that's
think
the
that
way-
the value is to get unique
Right.
perspectives. And if you agree with someone else, saying, I agree with Joe, and that
That's it.
provides further
Well,
impetus.
we might be able to provide some, encourage that behavior at the beginning of the meeting, but I
Yeah.
think that,
Or you
I will-
can spell it out in the, since, I mean, if
If
what
we-
Arlene said, it's already, you're already
Yes, it is
getting
already snowing.
accumulation. So you could state that in this document and say, you know, floor will be open for questions, you know, you want to be, I mean, you could give some kind of instruction, because this will be reposted.
do we want to collect questions and categorize them? In
It's gonna be
advance?
viewed as censorship.
Yeah. It's also gonna be
Just
hard,
let
yeah.
it go.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
just let
that
them-
would be viewed as censorship.
Well, I was thinking, you know, you could say, okay, this question or a similar version of it was asked by the following
say that.
20 people, and give their names, you know, so that they knew that, okay, that's, although,
You
I'm
can say
not
this
sure.
question's already asked and
I think
answered.
that if we have the chair, which will be Ellen, to, you know, just let folks know, 3 minutes for an individual, 5 minutes, and please, in the interest of time, if someone else has made comments, then just acknowledge them and pass your time to someone else. How's that sound? Does that work?
Yeah. I mean, literally passing the time to someone else, you can't yield your time as far as I know.
No.
we could allow that, but, I mean, we have allowed that in the past.
So, there have been a couple of times in the past, and for the current board, for you guys to remember, where we've had that question-answer timeframe, where it's been, you know, here's the report, and then open it up, you know, allow members, you know, you've been there to ask questions, and subject matter expert answers the questions, and board gets, I I would use that
There's a
format.
if there's a true dialogue, then you want to have it.
And that's what
The
it's
stopwatch
worked in the
The
past.
stopwatch will be suspended.
No, just, I mean, I would just go
I-
with that
I have
process
no
that we've
problem
done in
with
the
that,
past,
Yeah,
and just say,
have a
here's,
conversation with our membership.
and it's worked very well. When we did Dog Park and the Lake Newport Bladder Wart piece, and some other time we did it last year too. We did it, and it worked successfully, and I would just,
I have no
Again.
problem with it.
So in terms of the amount of time for the whole meeting, time to is resource. We have till 8:30. Is that adequate?
I'd like to change the whole format. I think, and I'm walking in Irwin's lane here, he's walking in mine, one of the two. But the purpose of this, let's hear from Stone Term, get their details, and let's hear from the members. Questions, comments, whatever else, and let it go, and absorb it, and let them go on. If it takes an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, I don't care. And like what Eric mentioned earlier, let's absorb that. And we can't just absorb that and then move on to the next time slot on the same day and make a decision based on that. It's illogical. If we're really listening to the members, and they're really listening to us,
But there wouldn't be any decisions
stop,
here.
please. Then we should that should be the focus of this meeting. Let's listen to the members, hear what they think is important, get their opinions on the Stone Turn report, everything else that's going on around us, ask a lot of questions, Dee's gonna be there. Great opportunity for people to ask the Stone Turn rep directly any questions they have. It's gonna clear a lot of this up right there.
They'll feel better, I think, yeah.
And then, a lot of this stuff, obviously, we can implement the basic recommendations. We all know that. We could get maybe most of the process stuff worked on.
Has this been
But
well
as far as the
advertised?
rest of it, and this healing situation that Ben talked about, and the moving forward, which Arlene talked about, and all of the trust issues that Irwin talked about, I for one want to hear what everybody has to say. And the tone of it's going to be really important to me too. You can tell a lot more about somebody in the way they're presenting something, just as much as what they're saying oftentimes. I want to see all that. I want to absorb all that. I want to sit back and think about that. And maybe discuss it the next day with Eric or with Mike or with Irwin. Hey, what was your take on this? And I think if we do that and then meet maybe a week later or the next month with the new board as far as the real guts of this thing, I think we shouldn't be deciding anything on the guts of this thing.
Are we gonna have a YouTube on this?
I don't want to sweep anything under the rug, as I've said before, and I don't want to have any witch hunts either, as I've said before. And the only way I see for me personally to do that is to really sit back and listen to what everybody has to say. People a lot smarter than me, much more in touch with this. I work all day and have things to do also. So there's a lot of people out there that have a lot more information than I do on all these specific topics. I want to hear that, absorb it, talk to other people, and then come to my conclusions. As far as the non-procedural, easy stuff, let's knock that stuff out quickly, I agree with that. But I think, I said that earlier, I think I'm following on to what Irwin said earlier as well, and that's how I'd like to see this meeting proceed. I want it to be a member meeting.
Is this gonna be
Okay.
videotaped?
It will be. Let's talk about framing it though. You know, it's not gonna go to 3 o'clock in the morning, right? Hopefully not. Tammy, let me just
Very
think.
short question. Are we paying Stone Turn to do this by the hour?
Stone Turn has offered to do this gratis, and so I want to be respectful
Yes.
of their time.
That's
Yes.
my concern.
Okay?
What's that arrangement?
That's
Also,
right.
Stone Turn has a lot to gain by having their name on a good report.
I
of this
understand,
magnitude.
it was just a technicality.
So there's no reason for them to charge
As
us.
a
It's a good business
paying
decision,
person, I
not.
want to see if this
No.
is.
I don't want to, they offered to do it,
I know.
and.
We don't want to abuse it.
That's
I don't
enough.
wanna abuse
Thank
it.
you. I just,
Good.
yep, thank you.
2 hours on this.
Okay, so I frankly would appreciate that. You know, I have a full-time job, I got a young family, I come to a lot of RA meetings, and those that will join the board will quickly recognize how taxing that is on your family.
Can I second that?
Please. So this is gonna go 6:30 till 8:30, we'll wrap up. Boards take incremental steps based on where we are. We have an item here, item D, board consideration of the Stone Turn report. What I'm thinking is, I frankly think it would be helpful for Kate to share the beginnings of an implementation plan. And frankly, you know, that plan is something that the board is going to have to approve at some point. It'll include the gaps that we're talking about. I would like to have an opportunity for her to share that. That has already been distributed with the initial draft agenda. But I think having some time on the agenda for Kate to go through that. Kate's got 10 minutes here. Folks can reference that.
I'm not sure, frankly, I'm not sure this is the meeting to do that at. I'm gonna,
Separate
I've
it.
got stuff I gotta do that's in this report intro, I'm gonna go ahead and plow through. There's stuff that
No,
I've gotta
you-
get in place,
you-
so
you absolutely-
I would rather wait, go through the listening piece, let's listen for additional things that need to be done. I'm not inclined to present anything. I think it's inappropriate.
That's the right outlet. I think if we listen and say, by the way, we're even though that we're right, there's some things that are procedural that we can just go ahead and do. We suggest to them, hey, thanks, if we got it already. I think let's just, let's have them, this can be their day. And we'll.
Yeah, and I'd rather, like I said, I've already added an item to my own list based on a conversation that we had today. I might add more, tweak it more. Janine had an interesting, piece over the weekend that I'm like, I want to include. I'm going to flesh that out and include that in. So I don't recommend that I do that yet.
So what are we saying about item E?
Nothing,
Just
take
remove
it
it.
out.
To remove it.
I'd remove it.
It may be helpful, Kate, when you're doing that too, to sort of divide this into things that you as CEO should be doing, like accounting policies or accounting procedures.
Internal stuff.
And things that the board needs to be engaged in, because there are two different kinds of things here. Some of it's just very operational down in the weeds. Some of it is more policy oriented.
You got it. I was thinking that too, and I was like, because that was the distinction that me and our CFO and the capital projects manager were putting this together. And I'm like, it is very resolution-based versus
It's not resolution
internal.
of policy, then you
Then it-
don't need.
right.
You
No,
need-
but I
mean, you
think
need-
it goes,
you
I
need
think it's
the board
important
then,
for
but
people to
not-
see
yeah,
what's
exactly.
going, I think,
Yeah.
based on everything, people need to see what's being put in place that frankly is
You mean
missing, was missing.
What wasn't in place?
What wasn't in place.
And then high-level policies
Message.
Right.
can be presented to the board
Right.
once a year or once
Right.
every 2 years, just to look at them, make sure that they make sense.
Okay, so just to reiterate, the first part of the meeting, right to item C is fine. We'll move F up, so it becomes D. Item E is removed, and we'll finish up by roughly 8:30, maybe 9 o'clock. So should we have a motion to?
I apologize. D, have you removed? Are you?
No, I think
You're
that.
moving it up.
No,
After
we're moving.
comments?
It'll
D
be.
is consideration of stone term report, whether you guys are.
The board should talk about the report.
Okay,
After
so
member
that
comments.
stays, after member comments.
After member
That
comments.
becomes E.
Well, but I would think that would be a short consideration. I mean, because really what the board should be doing is saying, as Ray pointed out, we will have received a massive dump of information from the community. And I think that beyond knowing that Kate's working the operational issues.
Well, I think ultimately we'll need a plan, an implementation plan for the
Right,
recommendation.
but that will be, I think, a next month action, probably. I mean, how would you be able, I don't know that you'll be able to do much of anything after 2 hours of listening to.
Mike, I think there's broad consensus on accepting the Stone Term report. That should not take so long.
Yep. No, so we'll just leave it as it is,
Yeah.
so that the board needs to act on it.
Yeah,
This
and
is
leave
good.
it at that, and nobody delves into the report at this
Yep.
time. That comes later.
And perhaps the board then can tell the folks that are here next steps moving forward. That this will be discussed at the next meeting, and,
Yep.
it's called
Yep,
sort of a plan of action,
yep,
rather than an implementation plan, but what the next steps will be.
yep. So we're 5 of 9. Kate, anything else that we need to do for this meeting?
And I will, at 5:30 a.m., I'll be able to, my staff and I will be coordinating on whether we're going to be open
Snow,
or not.
yeah.
But by probably well before 11, we'll be making a decision. We've already posted something, but I'll redo this and post, and
It'd be
redo this
shocking
for
if the
next
schools
week.
is closed.
We close Fairfax County government then.
That's
But
that way.
First snow day all year.
They're giving them free now, right? Because they have 10 a year and, right. That's it's no day. It's no day. I think so. Are we
All
done?
right, great.
are we done with the
Okay,
meeting?
so motion to adjourn?
Okay.
First,
Motion to adjourn.
second,
All in favor?
aye.
Thank you.